Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub. We now turn our attention to one of the most interesting and important social developments on the Israeli scene, the inclusion of ultra-Orthodox men of Haredim into the Israeli military, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. Many of you are aware that the Israeli Supreme Court struck down what was known as the Tal law, which exempted ultra-Orthodox Jews from military or national service in Israel to enable them to devote themselves entirely to Jewish study. Many Israelis felt this exemption was unfair, since these ultra-Orthodox Jews were not bearing their share of service to Israel. Some felt it was unwise because it deprived ultra-Orthodox men from the marvelous socialization that occurs when an Israeli teenager serves in the IDF with peers from virtually every other sector and strata of Israeli life. And there were those who felt that, as Jewishly idealistic as it might be for a community of Jews to be totally devoted to the study of Torah, the system also seemed to create a system where ultra-Orthodox Jews became a subgroup of Israelis who were isolated from the Israeli mainstream and often unable to support themselves with any meaningful employment. And so the place of the Haredi community in Israel in general, and the Tal law in particular, both have become issues of national Israeli concern. And for the first time in Israeli history, units of ultra-Orthodox Jews are being created within the IDF, and apparently with enormous success. And to discuss this new development on the Israeli scene, we're especially pleased to be joined by Mimi Kamilar, a spokesperson for the Nahal Haredi, which is a group that coordinates ultra-Orthodox participation in the IDF and assists both the Haredim and the IDF in dealing with any problems which may arise. And Mimi, it's a pleasure to be sitting with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I should also mention you're now with On Track Consulting in Israel. Tell us what On Track Consulting is.
On Track Consulting is a firm that helps Israeli nonprofit organizations who do tremendously wonderful work and need a little bit of help in their presentation and in their focus with their friends and partners around the world.
Now, you're from Canada.
Originally from Canada.
And you did a lot of work with the Canadian Jewish community. You are a mommy?
I am.
With how many children?
3 wonderful children.
And where do you live now?
Live in Beit Shemesh.
Okay. You are not part of the Haredi community in any sense?
No, I'm not.
Okay. But you now have been really working with them, and you are sort of a go-between between any Haredi community in the IDF, and if the IDF has a problem either that they can't solve, or maybe even a problem with the Haredim who are there. But you now have been on the front lines of this, and you have seen it firsthand. First of all, how many people are we talking about? How many now from the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Israel are now part of the IDF?
Through Nahal Haredi, there are individual Haredim that are in the army on their own.
Yes.
But through the Nahal Haredi, there are 2,000 soldiers that are in the army or have gone through the army.
Okay. As we're taping today, how recent is this?
Very.
Very, right?
Yes. The organization started 13 years ago. It started very small with 100 families participating, and it has grown tremendously over the years, and over the last 2 years, we're seeing explosive growth.
Okay. But we're still in the infancy of the program, are we not?
In the sense, in terms of numbers, yes. In terms of the program itself, no.
I'm curious to know, and very often we never think of asking from the Haredi perspective, how do the Haredim feel? How did they feel and how do they feel about the fact that the Tal law was overturned by the Israeli Supreme Court, the exemption was taken away, and now they're being asked to be part of the Israeli social scene through the IDF? How do they feel?
Well, of course, they feel hard done by. They feel that this is an injustice. They feel that they're being attacked politically, as they are by many places, many individual politicians. They feel that their community is being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Are they angry?
Possibly.
Are they bitter?
Sure.
Doesn't this get in the way of their being really absorbed into the IDF and becoming part of the Israeli army?
Well, in my personal opinion, if you put two groups head to head in this way, it's a no-win situation. It's a zero-sum game in the way certain politicians have placed in position the argument, shall we say. But it need not be. And really, Nahal Haredi is the answer. I call it the quiet revolution.
In what sense?
In the sense that it's established, it exists, it's highly successful, and its potential is tremendous.
Okay, I want to make sure we understand. What's the it when you say it is highly successful?
Well, let's first discuss what Nahal Haredi is. There are two elements to it. One is a military element, which is the unit that is in the army itself, in the IDF. And the other is a nonprofit organization that runs it and offers and provides all the Haredi-isms to the program, because the army, the IDF, is incapable or not set up for special groups, right? So a nonprofit organization works hand in hand with both the IDF and the Ministry of Defense, and they provide all the necessary elements to allow soldiers who come from a Haredi community to maintain their religious rigor, their religious requirements and standards while serving in a top-level combat unit in the IDF.
And that's what's been successful.
That's the success, and that's the key to future success.
Can you tell me some of the issues which American Jews might not immediately imagine when a Haredi community now becomes absorbed into the IDF?
Sure. They're numerous. The issues are numerous, and the obstacles that need to be overcome are also tremendous. But what Nahal Haredi provides is first and foremost the food, for example. Make sure that it's not just kosher, but that it's glatt kosher, that there are rabbis there to work with the boys, to study with the boys.
They do have time to study, don't they?
They study. Anytime they're not in active combat, they have opportunity to study. But what that means is that the rabbis are literally going out in their cars and jeeps out into the middle of the wilderness in order to meet with them in their tents at night, wherever possible, to study with them, to provide them with social services, to talk to them, to build a bridge between the boys and their families. Because there's a lot of lack of understanding. The army is a culture. The army has its own language, and Haredim don't have that language. They don't share it in common. So the rabbis serve as the bridge between their children, their sons in the army, and their families, so that they can be proud of their boys in the army.
That's interesting. Are there some Haredi parents who in some way feel that they're being betrayed because their sons are going off to the IDF?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Even though these sons have no choice?
Because they've been recruited. Well, some volunteer.
There is volunteering.
There is some volunteering. There's been an evolution since the establishment of Nahal Haredi. When it started, the boys that joined it were boys who were considered on the fringe element within the Haredi community. Over the years, it's grown and become slowly more acceptable. But there is still an educational process because they don't have that cultural background, whereby their parents need to learn and to understand that their boys are not turning their backs on the family, and that they can and should be very proud of them, and that they're not losing their religion. Mm-hmm. If they choose to maintain their religion, they can be as religious as they like.
Mm-hmm. Nahal Haredi preceded the overturn of the Tal law by the Supreme Court.
Correct.
So that in part, there already was from within the Haredi community a move towards, in some way, even if it was small, the idea that it's okay to be an ultra-Orthodox Jew committed to the study of Torah and at the same time serve in the IDF. Am I correct?
Yes. That is the strong belief of the founders and the leadership of Nahal Haredi.
Okay, who are the founders?
The founders are, the most famous founder is Yehuda Duvdevani, And the unit in the army is called Netzach Yehuda, named for Yehuda Duvdevani. And he was a brigadier general in the reserves, and he was the head of the youth department at the Ministry of Defense at the time of the founding.
Is he from the Haredi community?
No, he's not.
Okay, but he was able somehow to create an organization which served the Haredi community and tried to bring them into the IDF.
Yes, in its infancy, Rabbi Bar Chaim, who is still the head rabbi of our team, he was one of the initial founders. He turned to Duvdevani, and they had many, many discussions together, and Nahal Haredi was an outgrowth of those discussions. And he was searching for a solution for youth at risk from the Haredi community. And he felt if he could take them into the army, they had nothing in their lives. They weren't learning in yeshiva, they didn't have a vocation, they didn't have an education. If he could take them into the army and provide them with an education and the ability to work and to provide for their families, that he would be able to help them in that way. And that was the initial founding of Nahal Haredi, was in order to help youth at risk.
Okay, it's very important what you just said, because again, in America, the entire issue is often framed as simply a military issue, and are ultra-Orthodox Jews serving in the army or not. You've now broadened it and sophisticated it, because the issue becomes, as you describe it, how does the state of Israel basically take a piece of their community, the Haredi community, not only socialize them, but give them the skills necessary to be part of the broader social scene, for example, to be able to then find employment. And you heard my introduction where I tried to mention some of the reasons why this became more front and center on the Israeli scene. And a lot of it had to do with socialization. Speak for a moment about how important you think that is.
Extremely. I cannot emphasize how important that is. If you look at the statistics of the population growth between the Haredi population of youth and the Israeli Arab population, we're looking at numbers that within a few years, 50% of the population, the 18-year-old population, will be either Haredi or Arab. Therefore, if those populations are not in the army, you have a situation where the minority, the Israeli minority, is the only one serving in the conscripted army, and essentially they feel more and more like mercenaries for every other member of society. Mm-hmm. So you have a huge socialization issue going on in terms of the different ethnic groups within Israeli society on the one hand, and on the other hand, exactly as you were mentioning, you have an issue where if the men in the Haredi community are only learning and they are not in the workforce, you have a problem with supporting not only their individual families, but their entire community. And as taxpayers within Israeli society, you have a problem in every city in the entire country. So in Israel, you cannot get a job if you haven't served in the army. It's illegal. So until a certain age when they eventually get an exemption, but to enter the workforce at 40 years old for the first time is not a recipe for success, mm-hmm. or for a successful society, economically speaking. So therefore, it's very important that those youth have some sort of ability to either pursue a vocational profession and or an academic standard, so that they'll be able to work in the workforce and be legally allowed to, because they have served in the IDF.
Mm-hmm. I want to try to avoid stereotyping here, because again, in America and in parts of the Israeli culture, there is a tendency to lump all Haredi into one group, and sometimes they're vilified. You've dealt with the individuals, people, you know them. I assume that there are those who you may not warm to, but that there are many you do. Am I correct?
Sure, just like any other group.
Right. In general, do you have a feeling of how Haredi feel about the state of Israel as a Jewish state?
That's a very complex question. There are so many different groups.
Yes.
Hundreds of different groups.
Yes.
And each group feels very differently. But my personal experience, as opposed to groupings is that most people are very comfortable. They feel they first and foremost recognize Israel as the Holy Land. And they recognize that every step they take in the Holy Land is sacred. And they have great appreciation and respect for that. That's first and foremost. So they're very happy living there.
But that's not about a state.
Correct. I don't pretend to speak for the groups, but most individuals that I meet with don't have major issues. They may have issues with politicians. I think most of us do.
Right.
But overall, day to day, people are very happy living there and recognize that they're living there. I think we have to differentiate between the individual level and the political level.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes very messy.
The group you're working with, Nahal Haredi, preceded the repeal of the Tal law.
Correct.
You're here in part because the Tal law has now resulted in a significant increase of Haredim in the IDF. Have you seen a change within the Israeli society as a whole in attitudes towards the Haredim because of more ultra-Orthodox Jews going into the IDF?
I see great respect for those that choose to go into the IDF, tremendous respect
Is it a matter of choice?
at this stage.
No one's being, quote, drafted.
We're still in that in-between stage,
Where they're
no
trying to
man's
figure
land.
out how
We're
to
trying
do
to
it.
see what's going to happen.
Okay. So when you tell me 2,000 are now in the IDF, these are 2,000 volunteers.
Yes,
And that has had some impact on Israeli public opinion.
absolutely. I think most Israelis are very proud of Nahal Haredi. Anybody I've ever mentioned the organization's name to or seen, everybody's very proud to have it as part of the IDF. And I think that's the beauty of it. As an organization, they work very hard to stay apolitical, remain apolitical. It's very important for building those bridges. But what Nahal Haredi does is they provide the platform and a tremendous program that's a win-win situation for all sides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of it, because the potential is just tremendous.
I saw that the ultra-Orthodox group within the IDF, and as a unit they're called what?
Netzach Yehuda,
Netzach Yehuda, again after the founder.
yes.
Okay. I saw that Netzach Yehuda recently scored very, very well in some kind of competition, and that in general there seems to be a talent for the kind of rigors, certainly mentally and in some way physically, the rigors of military service in the IDF that comes with the training the Haredi have received in their Talmud study. Can you speak about that at all?
It's
First of all,
hearsay, but
it's true. As far as you know, this is true.
I believe so. I believe so. In other words, what I see, what I can state are the facts, which are these boys coming into the Army with no Army consciousness whatsoever. Every boy, every non-Haredi boy in Israel, non-Arab or non-Haredi boy, loves the Army. From the time they're 6 years old, they know different crests and different units. And the Haredim don't have that. They
Yes.
have no culture of Army. They have no knowledge of it and no respect for it. And then they come into the Army, but what they do have, as you mentioned, is their Talmud study and their rigorous training in intellectual processing. And then they come into the Army, they accept the discipline, they work very hard, and they succeed beyond anybody's imagination with award-winning combat anti-terrorist activity. It's mind-boggling.
It's stunning.
It's stunning.
Okay. I don't know if we have enough evidence yet. Do we have any sense of how they come out of the IDF service? Do they come out changed? Is their attitude about the IDF changed? Is their attitude about Israel as a Jewish state changed? Is their feeling about ultra-Orthodox life? Does that change at all? Do we have any evidence on these three areas yet?
Of the alumni that I've met,
Yes.
I think they are all changed people. I think they gained self-confidence in the Army. They gained a sense of purpose in life and their contribution to society. And their outlook on the Army itself as a place of growth and of learning and of protecting the Jewish nation is completely changed from what it was when they came into the army.
All for the good.
All for the good.
That's
there is
good.
no downside.
Right. Mm-hmm. And what you also said, I want to reinforce this, is this has also had a positive impact on how the Israeli community as a whole views the Haredi community.
Absolutely.
You said you have 3 children?
I do.
What are their ages?
19, 17, and 13.
They all are Israeli citizens?
Yes.
And have the 2 older yet served in the IDF?
My oldest is my daughter, and she is currently serving the country in what is called Sherut Leumi, which is a
National service.
national service in lieu of army. She's going into her 2nd year now,
Very lovely.
and she's working.
What's her name?
Her name is Aviela.
Aviela, okay. By the way, I should have asked, what's your husband's name?
Steve.
And what does he do?
He's in video production.
And where did you meet Steve? Is he a Canadian boy also?
No, he's American.
American. Okay, right.
From
So that's the
Miami.
19-year-old.
That's my 19-year-old.
Then your next one is?
Is his son, Tzvi, and he's just got his first call up for the Army.
Very nice.
So he went for his interview.
Okay, and as a mommy, how much anxiety does it evoke in you?
Tremendous. Tremendous. I am expecting not to sleep for quite a few years.
It is a reality of Israeli life, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
What's your sense of how Israelis now feel? How do you feel, your husband feel, about the peace process?
Peace process and the world situation, I would say trepidation is the way I would describe it. In terms of the peace process, we feel very stuck. We feel we have no partner at the moment. That pretty much it's consensus in Israel. Everybody wants peace, but we don't seem to have a partner to work with. And it's very frustrating.
Are you personally satisfied with the concept of a 2-state solution?
No.
Because?
I don't see how it can work. I think that most Israelis that I know are willing to accept any solution as long as it can work.
Yes, but that's my sense too. I talk to Israeli after Israeli, and they would do anything, and it's not about what we do give up, we don't give up. If ultimately no Israeli has to worry when their child or grandchild leaves the home, and ultimately whoever's on the West Bank is living with the State of Israel in peace, they'll do anything.
That's right.
And yet at the same time, they feel at the moment there is no one who really is serious about peace. But I asked you for a concept, in concept, if you thought there were a Palestinian leadership willing to live side by side with the State of Israel in peace, would you be comfortable relinquishing the West Bank?
If that was a guarantee to
Yes.
peace, most likely, yes.
Okay. Would you be willing to see East Jerusalem as the capital of this Palestinian state?
That would be more difficult for me.
Why?
The unification of Jerusalem is central to Jewish peoplehood. I respect that other religions also see Jerusalem as its capital, but I would not want us to relinquish it.
Okay. And supposing in some way some kind of political structure were created where Israel would still be in control of Jerusalem, but there would be a piece of East Jerusalem that would also be recognized as the capital of the Palestinian state. Could you live with that for real peace?
If there were some way to do that, yes.
Mm-hmm. Has America of late been good to Israel?
Not particularly,
You wish it had been better?
yes.
Okay.
I wish it were friendlier,
Okay.
more understanding.
You're talking about tone, aren't you? Are you talking about tone or policy?
Definitely tone and some policy.
Can you give me, again, we're not doing personalities now.
Right.
It doesn't matter who's in the White House. Can you give me an example of a policy you wish were different from the American perspective? What policy bothers you? And the reason I say that is, I can understand the tone issue. I don't understand the policy issue. What policy do you feel America has adopted that is bad for Israel?
Settlements on the West Bank.
Okay, so one of the things that has been very troubling, and troubling to many American Jews as well, is any attempt to make it seem as if the settlements are the obstacle to peace.
Correct.
That's what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And furthermore, just as an example, I mean, the policy extends to the fact that people who want to do renovations on their existing homes cannot do that. It just seems absurd to me.
Doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like to see a two-state solution in which, if Israelis want to remain in settlements that exist there now, they should have the right to do that?
Absolutely.
In terms of the way in which, leave the peace process out now, you look at Israeli society today. At one point, we always imagined that the state of Israel would have the best educational system in the world. And yet we've heard reports after reports that somehow it slipped. As you look at Israeli social life, having nothing to do with the Palestinians, just internally, at the moment, what concerns you the most?
Probably the education.
Do you see any hope there? Is there any movement there to you?
I once heard that Rabbi Cook,
Yes.
the first chief rabbi of Israel, begged the state, the original minister of education, to establish a Jewish curriculum. He said, we established curriculum back in Sinai. We don't need to adopt curriculum from Germany. But the state didn't listen, and we took the German curriculum. And
We've paid a price.
Unfortunately, we've paid a big price.
Mm-hmm. Are you concerned at all about the Jewish character of the state of Israel? Sometimes I have people come here and say to me that we in America have a certain kind of Jewish identity problem, but that lo and behold, there's also a concern that among Israeli youth, there is not a profound enough appreciation for what it is, not to be Israeli, to be a Jew. Is that something you've experienced? Does it concern you?
Yes.
Talk about it a moment. Where have you experienced it, and what do you feel about it?
Well, I think it's lacking in the educational system, because a regular student in a regular school will get almost no sense and pride for their Jewish peoplehood. They'll just be studying their subjects, and they're not part of a community because they're in the Jewish state. So they don't live within any type of a ethnic community whatsoever. And as a result, there's something sorely lacking in society.
Ironic, isn't it, that you and I who grew up in diaspora, I in America, you in Canada, we were aware of our being a minority and an ethnic community, and in some way, the fact that we were Jewish became even more central to our conscious awareness. It sounds like you're saying that in Israel, because it's Jewish everywhere, the Jewishness of being an Israeli is sometimes lost on young people. Do I have it correct?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you have it 100% correct.
Is there something you do about it?
This is why I'm in the business I'm in. I actually was in high tech for 9 years.
Really?
Yes, I worked for startups. I was vice president of a few different establishments, COO of a online finance company, and I chose to go to nonprofit in order to make more of an impact on society.
That's wonderful, Mimi. And you're being watched by Jews and non-Jews all over America and in Canada. Speak for one more moment about what it is for you to grow up as a Canadian Jew in a modern Orthodox household with two other sisters, and then you choose to make Aliyah despite what you know are the challenges of Israeli life. What's the message you feel in some way you are living? And it's not like you think everybody has to do it your way, but there is something wonderful, Mimi, about the life you've chosen. And I want to know if you can articulate what it means to you. What's the most important part of it, and how this, enriches who you are?
Everybody has something to contribute to their local society and to their people, wherever they live around the world. The reason I made Aliyah and chose to live in Israel is because I wanted to make my contribution in my country. And I feel that I am one of the luckiest people in the world because I have a beautiful family and I am living out my dream by contributing, helping organizations that do wonderful work and that are there to help the Jewish people and all people around the world. I couldn't be happier.
Mimi Kamilar, this has been an honor meeting you. I hope that both on-track consulting and the experience you have now with the Haredim who are part of the IDF is something that enriches your life, and that as the process continues, you'll have an opportunity to sit with us again and again. And I'd love, to have your perspective, a year and 2 and 5 years out. But I wish you kol tuva hatzlacha. Thank you. You're
It'd be my pleasure.
extraordinary.
It has been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. And that was my meeting with Mimi Kamilar. And again, you've heard her discuss some of the most profound issues affecting current Israeli society today. As always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Please be in touch with me this week. Email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.